When I think about Dave, Charles Schwab was my mentor for a dozen years. I worked for him when he was buying himself back. We listed on the stock exchange, and we were so proud because we just bought ourselves back from Bank of America, that at the time was the biggest bank in the world. And we did the first management-led buyback and got it approved by the regulators in the SEC. And it was with such pride, we went public on the New York Stock Exchange October 1st, 1987, followed 3 weeks later by an event that's still memorable. And it took 5 full years before we recovered to our IPO price. 5 years. So the first thing I did, I had just arrived at the company. The first thing I did is we took pay cuts, and we, created a long-term incentive plan because the stock really wasn't worth anything. And nobody's want to do a brokerage company at a time like this. How do you think about persistence and resilience?
We got to do whatever we have to do. No more excuses. We're not waiting for anyone to save us. We got to bootstrap this, and we got to figure this out on our own. And thankfully, we have a lot of resources, including you, Mark, to help us out. I'll be honest, there's not a day that goes by, and I know Marge probably might feel the same way, where and I felt this way even before the coronavirus epidemic.
Yes.
There's always about 5 minutes to 10 minutes where I'm like, I can't do this. It's too goddamn hard. And then it's like, that's how I start my day. Almost like my day doesn't start until I quit in my head. And then I do these ruminations, and I'm like, oh, and it's weird. It's like I start this weird maze in my head. And then when I get to the other side, I'm like, oh, I don't even say I can't do this. I'm just like, oh, what's next? And that's how it begins. And it's a very Sisyphean task, is to literally embrace the absurd. The only choice I have is to rebel against the situation that is presented to me. And I genuinely believe that. And that could mean in a variety of situations. And that's the freedom of choice that I have, is no matter how difficult the obstacle is. And I'm not saying I don't want to quit, but I just have to want it a little bit more than I want to quit. And that's how I get to the next day. It's not words of inspiration, I know, but I think you got to be honest. This is brutal. This is really hard. And I think Marge and I are, if you talked to us 3 weeks ago, there were a lot of tears. There were a lot of tears. I'm not saying they're not still tears, but I feel like we've come out the other side of oh, we're presented with a situation that's never happened in modern times, at least in 100 years. We got to do whatever we can to make sure that our restaurants and the independent restaurant that make up this great country, they don't turn out like Lehman Brothers. So we got to do whatever we have to do.
It's such a good point, and it's a hell of a mantra to start every day that way, and yet it's a better, perhaps more realistic representation of how we actually feel, because you got to own that first before you can ever decide to do something that's constructive.
It's literally every day, Mark. And by the time it's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, I'm like, really tired. All I want to do is go to sleep. Start it up the next day. Yeah.
That's why I called you at exactly that time. Just when you've gone through the Ark of the Covenant there, through the Valley of Death, he emerges. That's where March takes the ball all the way into the end zone.